Chapter 31. Lonnie. Summer and Lonnie sat at a wooden picnic table outside Lonnie's trailer getting ready to enjoy their dinner in the cooling evening air. As Lonnie took a sip of her tea, she noticed Kai strolling by on the worn path, hands in his pockets and his head down. She couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness and longing as she watched him, his head bowed, knowing grief still gripped him, never releasing its clutches on his soul. She understood it more than anyone else, since they mourned the same loss. They just did so in different ways. Her grief was there always, but she gave it a place to live, a place not allowed to step into the other parts of her. She had to, or else she wouldn't be able to wake up in the morning and face the day. Kai did not. He let grief consume him. "Little brother, come over," Lonnie called, waving. He nodded and made his way across the backyard, but his scowl was clear when he saw Summer sitting at the picnic table. As he approached, he couldn't help but notice the noise from inside the trailer. The door swung open, and Chris emerged with a large pot of spaghetti in hand, steam rising from its surface. "Hey, Kai," Chris said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Kai lifted his head and offered a tight grimace, and let out a quiet hey. From the corner of his eye, he caught Lonnie's disapproving glare, and shifted uneasily as he sat down at the picnic table. "Glad you're here. There's some pressing topics regarding volunteer training that I want to discuss with you," Chris said, oblivious to the interaction between the two siblings. Lonnie placed a warm, freshly baked loaf of bread and a crisp bowl of salad on the picnic table. She put out plates, butter, and glasses before joining Chris as he served spaghetti onto each plate. The smell of the homemade meal wafted through the air with a mouth-watering aroma. Summer's face brightened as she looked at Lonnie with a mix of admiration and adoration that was hard to miss. "This looks amazing," Summer exclaimed, her smile beaming at the feast before them. It was clear to Kai that Summer idolized his sister, and he could see why. He did too. He cleared his throat.
"Yes, looks delicious. Thanks for the invite."
"Well, thank you guys for the company." Lonnie looked around at the group of people, a mixture of gratitude and satisfaction in her eyes. "Dig in, guys, before it gets cold." The rising warmth emanated from their plates, creating a cozy ambiance as everyone eagerly served themselves. Chris grinned as he sat down, his arm brushing against Lonnie's. Lonnie looked at her brother, wondering if he had noticed the interaction between Chris and her. From the moment Lonnie kissed Chris on the training field, their world exploded, alive with new possibilities. As she pulled back from her kiss, his face showed a mix of astonishment and longing, exposing his true feelings for her. It was a yearning and the faint spark of hope for both. Chris opened his mouth to say something, but Lonnie leaned in closer and pressed her lips against his, slightly parting them. He grasped her shoulders, squeezing, pulling her to him, and she felt herself melt. When they pulled away, breathless, their gaze locked with a ravenous desire that was unfamiliar to them both. Lonnie took hold of his hand and brought it to her lips, planting a kiss on each finger. Turning, still holding his hand, she guided him towards their trailer. Could Kai tell that things had changed between her and Chris? Could he see the flush on their faces when they looked at each other? She thought of earlier, wrapped in Chris's arms, spent, surprised that she still had passion inside her. Yet she did. Oh boy, did she ever. Her face flushed a deeper red, still feeling Chris's fingers tracing down her stomach, across the faded white stretch marks below her belly button. Permanent marks etched on her flesh. A reminder of the precious life that she once carried within her. The memory, forever ingrained in her skin. Chris tilted his head down and then looked back up at her with a questioning expression. But when he caught the look in her eyes, he leaned in and kissed each of her tiny white scars, opening her up with little effort. She arched her back, yearning for his touch, wanting him to engulf her right then and there, with a thirst that she hadn't realized she had. After, as they lay entwined, Chris's stubble grazed her neck with each gentle kiss, sending a tingling sensation through her body. He held her tightly against his bare flesh, savoring the warmth of her skin pressed against his. She never wanted him to let go. His hand brushed against her soft stomach, where once a child grew. He hugged her even tighter, cradling her protectively, not saying a word. She would tell him, of course, about Chrissy. Just not then. as he held her naked. There would be time, later, for that story of loss and sorrow. In that moment, she'd indulged in their shared longing and solace of his arms. She'd long ago put notions of love and attraction aside, or so she thought. Yet, here she was. Every time she looked at Chris, or listened to him speak with his rich, joyful voice, she couldn't stop thinking of earlier. Of them, together, lips locked, each as hungry as the other. She glanced at Chris and felt her cheeks grow warm. He noticed and blushed as well, quickly turning his attention to his plate. He eagerly picked up his fork and raved about the spaghetti, claiming it was the best he had ever tasted with each bite. Lonnie chuckled at his attempt to act casual in front of Kai and Summer. "So, Lonnie." Summer eagerly scooped up a forkful of spaghetti, twirling the strands around her fork before taking a big bite. Picking up a slice of crusty bread from the basket on the table, she tore off a piece and dipped it into the thick sauce. It was tasty, even with no meat in it. At the moment, the food supply was good, but that might not always be the case. With winter fast approaching and more people coming to the community, Lonnie wanted to have some heartier food in reserve for when resources became scarce. She prayed it wouldn't come down to that, but she wanted to be ready just in case. The committees agreed unanimously. They would hunt and gather as much as they could and prepare and store it for the winter, when meat and other food was harder to get, and use it to fill empty stomachs when there was less at the table. Summer took another bite of the spaghetti, savoring the rich, tangy flavor of the sauce.
"The spaghetti is good. Never had any sauce like this before,"
she exclaimed between mouthfuls, completely absorbed by it.
"Is it some kind of Indian recipe?"
It was impossible for Lonnie to hold back her laughter.
"What kind of Indian recipe?" I don't know. You guys got a specific recipe? All I've ever had is canned sauce. I ain't got much experience with other folks' foods."
The clanking of a knife abruptly broke the quietness of the meal. Kai shoved a fork of spaghetti into his mouth, shaking his head in disbelief.
"We don't use the word Indian anymore, and we are not all the same. We are Ojibwe, and no, we did not create spaghetti sauce. That is Italian, not Indian."
Lonnie's hand flew out, smacking Kai on the arm with a sharp snap.
"Enough,"
she reprimanded, her eyes narrowed in disappointment.
"It's my own creation. I'll share it with you. We can make it together. It's something I have cultivated over the years, tweaking it to just my liking, adding a little this or that. It would be nice to pass it on."
Lonnie scowled at Kai, embarrassed by his attack on the girl. Summer's face flushed with anger and shame, her words dripping with sarcasm as she retorted,
"Oh, forgive me, Mr. High and Mighty Indian, or whatever you want to be called today. I was too busy being knocked around from one foster home to the next to keep track of what is and what isn't acceptable to speak at the moment."
Summer slammed her fork onto the plate, scattering crumbs and pieces of bread. She clenched her teeth together as she spoke, the bitterness and hurt seeping through every word.
"Do you have any idea how many schools I've been to?"
She leaned towards Kai, her eyes blazing with anger.
23 different schools in a single year. And yet you sit there all smug and offended, expecting me to know every single damn cultural custom and tradition out there."
She took a bite of the warm, freshly baked bread, chewing it furiously before continuing.
"Pure miracle I can read it all. But hey, who the fuck cares about that? Pfft, the nerve of me asking about spaghetti."
Lonnie gently touched Summer's fist, wrapped tight around her fork. She could sense the tension and hurt in the young girl's grip. She looked into Summer's eyes and spoke with genuine warmth.
"You are a part of our family now. You don't have to go anywhere else again. This is your home, if you will have us."
Summer blinked in surprise at Lonnie's words, unsure of how to respond. She quickly wiped her mouth and set the napkin down on the table. Overcome with emotions, she stuttered.
I have to go."
She stood up abruptly, turning away from them so they wouldn't see the tears beginning to stream down her face. Lonnie felt a surge of anger as she watched the young girl stifle her emotions and run away, retreating into herself.
"Summer, wait,"
Lonnie called out.
I made your favorite dessert, apple pie, just for you."
She watched as Summer's pace quickened, not bothering to respond. Kai pushed forkfuls of spaghetti into his mouth, his eyes fixed on his plate. Shame radiated from him, and knew that her calling out his behavior embarrassed him. But she didn't care. Lonnie endured this nonsense for too long. She couldn't stand by and ignore it any longer. Kai berated the girl for no reason, flying off the handle just because he didn't like her.
You know, she's just a kid. A traumatized child.
Kai paused, not looking up from his plate.
Have you seen her stomach? There's nothing child about her.
That shows how little you know,
Lonnie said, shaking her head in disbelief at her brother's thoughtlessness.
You are so blinded by your own grief, you forget that hard times and sadness hit many. Every person living on Earth is subject to it. Cruelty is something that relentlessly follows us all.
She bent her head, suddenly drained.
So is kindness. Do better, Kai. I expect more from you.
Chris let out a nervous cough. She cleared her throat and spoke firmly, making sure both heard her. Her eyes were fierce as she stared at the two men who berated Summer. Seeing the pain and the brokenness in the young girl's eyes, Lonnie had enough. They were too hard on her. She wasn't going to allow them to continue to belittle the troubled girl. There would be no more of it. Over her dead body. There was something about the teenager that she felt a kindred spirit with, which was weird since they couldn't be more different. Summer, bold and unafraid, exuded strength and power, while Lonnie always felt timid and easily swayed. Her emotions were simple to see, yet she felt so connected to the fiery girl. An unspoken understanding between them. She wanted to protect her, and the tiny bump beneath Summer's oversized hoodie, with all her might. Lonnie's heart swelled with warmth as she recalled the many times she'd listened to the gentle thumping of the tiny heart beneath her stethoscope. Each beat a delicate note that filled her ears and brought a smile to her face. She felt privileged being able to witness and share this moment with Summer, watching as the girl's eyes grew wide with wonder and amazement at the miracle of life growing within her. It was a simple joy, but one that touched Lonnie deep in her soul. She knew who Summer was beneath her hard shell. She knew her, and she was going to protect her at all costs. Chris and Kai were going to have to smarten up and start treating Summer as family, or deal with Lonnie. She thought of Chris and his warm lips tingling on hers, her insides lightening up after a long darkness. And she thought of Kai, her only remaining family, and how much she loved him with all his idiosyncrasies, his passions, his deep sadness, and the rage that would not let him go. Yet, he was a compassionate man, filled with kindness for those he loved. He was going to have to release the burden of the darkness within him. It was Kai who envisioned Hayden, and now, here it was. Alive, and he was sulking around like a giant man-baby because the people in Hayden's community were not who he imagined.
You know, Kai, you are behaving rather narrow-minded and, dare I say, judgmental,
Lonnie blurted out, fed up. Both Chris and Kai looked up at her, their expressions contorted with shock and disgust. Kai abruptly jumped from his seat, nearly sending his plate of half-eaten spaghetti flying. She met his gaze, her eyes drilling into his with disappointment. Slowly, he sank back down into his seat, his face now tinged with shame. Chris stood next to her. His own reactions mirrored Kai's. Lonnie reached out and touched his arm before turning back to look at her brother. Chris sat back down, and she lowered herself beside him. His hand reached under the picnic table and squeezed her knee, giving her strength and causing a twisting, turning sensation in her pelvis. A feeling long thought gone.
We grew up with two loving parents who would do anything for us. Yes, we lost our mother, but it was through sickness, not because she abandoned us. She fought with every breath of her life to stay with us. Lonnie held back the tears that threatened to fall, taking a deep breath to open the tightness forming in her throat. Our father was a good man, a wonderful father. He taught you the very skills keeping all of us alive. She turned to Chris. You've told me many stories about how your father did the same for you growing up. How you spent every free time in your childhood with him in nature, learning to live off the land, just like our father did with us. Chris nodded. His father's presence was stronger than ever with him since coming to Hayden. He'd confessed to Lonnie that, more than ever, he felt like himself. Like he did those moments with his dad growing up. Summer has had none of that. No mother, no father, no one to teach her anything but how easy it is to toss a child away.
She paused, pressing her lips together, imagining Summer as a little girl, alone with no one to protect or care for her. She closed her eyes, trying to forgive a world that took children too early and threw away others like misfit toys.
We are Hayden.
She opened her eyes and looked at her brother. Chris's fingers grip her knee, sending power to course through her body.
You don't get to choose who Hayden's doors open for. That is not how it works. You have said from the moment you created this place that the people who need it will come. And they have. The world you envisioned is here. Those in need have come.
Her face softened, seeing the struggle on her brother's face. Her heart ached for him. She loved him so much and wished she could wash away the pain that lay stagnant and oily inside him. Take it away and allow him to live again.
I agreed to come here because I believed in your vision. Your dream. I believed in you.
She extended her hand towards Kai, who placed his much larger one in hers. Kai's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible, but she caught every word.
You're right, as always.
With a soft touch, she clasped his hands with both of hers, feeling the comforting warmth spread through her palms. Chris's firm grip, still on her knee, grounded her. She closed her eyes and let their presence wash over her. These two men who were hers, giving her strength and so much more. Perhaps they could begin again, leaving behind their old lives and grievances. Kai and Lonnie united in their shared loss, while Chris tried to move on from his troubled past and connections with the decree. Start from scratch in a world where starting over appeared impossible. This new world that forced them to reevaluate who they were and how they would face survival in what remained in the living world. A world that they all had to navigate and exist in.
Summer should learn how to fish,
Lonnie said, not moving.
You should take her out with you next time. Teach her how to hunt and fish, clean it, cook it, out in the woods alone. Teach her how to live off the land. She's hungry for knowledge, and she is a survivor. You can teach her this.
Lonnie looked at Chris.
You both should, like your fathers taught each of you.
Kai looked up and nodded.
I will,
he said without question.
Teach her everything, Kai. Like an uncle would.
He looked up with a flicker of defiance in his eyes, but remained silent, nodding in agreement.